also appeared on her face. But when she heard the second half, the smile on her face immediately froze. Immediately after, she quickly lifted her foot and lightly kicked Grandpa Shen's calf. Grandpa Shen yelped in pain. He also immediately realized he had misspoken. He hurriedly looked at Shen Mengxi. He saw that the smile on Shen Mengxi's face was still there. Only, the smile didn't reach her eyes. Instead, it revealed a hint of gloom and sorrow that was hard to hide. Seeing this, Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen's hearts both tightened. Filled with heartache, Grandma Shen quickly took Shen Mengxi's hand, just as she was about to say something comforting. At this moment, clear and melodious piano sound, without any warning, came from the second floor. It broke the silence in the pavilion. All three of them were stunned. They simultaneously looked up in the direction of the sound. A hint of worry flashed across Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen's faces. They subconsciously looked towards Shen Mengxi. Shen Mengxi, however, tilted her head slightly, listening quietly for a moment. A faint and gentle smile slowly spread across her face. I didn't expect Nanai to know how to play the piano. She gathered her thoughts. Her eyes became a bit clearer. She turned to look at Grandpa and Grandma Shen and said with a smile, "Grandpa, Grandma, let's go up and see." The two of them looked at the genuine smile on her face. A little stunned, they clearly didn't expect her to react this way, but seeing that she seemed genuinely interested, they nodded in agreement. "Okay, let's go take a look." Meanwhile, a few minutes earlier, Nanai ran to the innermost room on the right of the second floor. She reached out to open the door. Just as she was about to step into the room, I grabbed the back of her collar. Nanai tilted her head. Her big, clear eyes were full of confusion. "Daddy," I was just about to tell her not to run around. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a piano placed in the room. It looked very prominent in the somewhat empty room. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at Nanai and asked gently, "Nanai, do you know how to play the piano?" As soon as Nanai heard this, her little face immediately bloomed with pride. She nodded vigorously. "Yes, Mommy taught me." As she spoke, she turned and took my hand. Excitedly, she walked into the room. "Daddy, come and see." She pulled me into the room. My gaze fell on a cabinet. A few trophies were neatly arranged on top. Glistening gold. They were very dazzling. I let go of Nene's hand and slowly walked over. I looked closely. I discovered that those trophies had small cracks, as if someone had dropped them. One was even missing a small corner. I frowned slightly, a trace of confusion rising in my heart. "What's this, Daddy?" Just as I was thinking, Nene's clear voice brought me back to my senses. I turned my head and saw that Nene had already run to the piano. She was trying to pull off the white dust cover from the piano. Seeing this, I temporarily suppressed the doubts in my heart and quickly walked over. I asked gently, "What's wrong?" Nene looked up. She pointed at the piano, her eyes sparkling as she looked at me. "Daddy, can you help me open the piano?" I looked at my daughter's expectant eyes and nodded. I reached out and completely lifted the dust cover, revealing the glossy black piano. I then gently opened the keyboard lid. The moment the lid was opened, I noticed the edge of the lid. There seemed to be a small dent, though it wasn't obvious, but you could still see it if you looked closely, as if it had been hit. I silently averted my gaze. Nene couldn't wait any longer. She climbed onto the accompanying piano bench. Her small figure sitting on the large piano bench looked a bit comical. She adjusted her sitting posture. Her small hands were placed on the keys in a professional manner. The next second, a clear, childish piano sound came from her little fingertips, although her playing was a bit hesitant, and she occasionally hit a few wrong notes. Overall, it was still quite smooth and skillful. It was clear she had put in a lot of effort. Just then, a soft footstep was heard from outside the door. Coming closer, I looked up towards the door. I saw Shen Mengxi and the others standing at the door. "Mommy!" As soon as Nene saw Shen Mengxi, her eyes lit up. Her little face broke into a radiant smile. She stopped playing the piano and excitedly waved her small hand towards Shen Mengxi. Shen Mengxi's lips curved as she walked straight towards Nene. "Nene, you play so well." Shen Mengxi walked to the piano. She praised her gently, her voice laced with a smile. She naturally sat down on the other side of the piano bench, tilting her head slightly to look at her daughter. Nene, praised by her mother, had a smug look on her little face. She looked up and looked at Shen Mengxi expectantly. "Mommy, let's play together." Shen Mengxi smiled and nodded. She reached out her slender fingers and gently placed them on the keys. "Okay, let's play together." As she spoke, the melody started again. Only this time, the piano sound became smooth and harmonious. Two hands, one large and one small, danced on the black and white keys. Warm notes filled the entire room. Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen stood at the door. Watching this scene, joyful smiles appeared on their faces. The worry on Grandpa Shen's face gradually disappeared, replaced by a kind smile. Watching his granddaughter and great-granddaughter getting along so harmoniously, a warmth spread through his heart. As for me, standing beside them, I looked at Shen Mengxi's gentle profile as she played the piano, and then at her grandparents at the door, who were clearly relieved. My brows furrowed even tighter. A moment later, the piano came to its final note. Shin Mengsi and Nainai looked at each other and smiled, perfectly in sync. Afterwards, the two of them, without planning it, turned their gazes towards me. Standing at the side, I looked at the mother and daughter. A gentle smile also appeared in my eyes. Immediately after, I winked at Nainai, and then quietly glanced at Grandpa and Grandma Shen at the door. The clever Nainai immediately understood her father's meaning. She slid off the piano bench. Taking short steps, she happily ran towards Grandpa and Grandma Shen at the door. Great-grandma. Great-grandpa. Her voice was clear, sweet, and adorable. As soon as Grandpa and Grandma Shen heard her, the smiles on their faces immediately bloomed like chrysanthemums. Incredibly radiant, Grandma Shen quickly squatted down, opening her arms. Aya! Nainai! My good great-granddaughter. Grandpa Shen also couldn't stop smiling. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened. Nainai threw herself into Grandma Shen's arms. Grandpa Shen also reached out and kindly stroked her little head. Shin Mengsi sat on the bench. Watching this scene, the curve of her lips unconsciously deepened a little more. Grandma Shen held Nainai, while Grandpa Shen teased her from the side. Both of their attentions were focused on Nainai. They led her downstairs. They had no time to pay attention to the two people in the room. Soon, only Shen Mengsi and I were left in the room. I looked at Shen Mengsi and said with a smile, I didn't expect you to play the piano so well. Hearing my compliment, Shen Mengsi's lips curved slightly, carrying a barely perceptible hint of pride. She gently closed the piano lid with her hand, making a soft clicking sound. Grandma taught me when I was little, she said softly. Her tone carried a hint of nostalgia. I nodded. My gaze casually swept across the room, the cabinet in the corner, then it returned to Shen Mengsi's face. I asked casually, it seems you won a lot of awards when you were a child. The faint smile on Shen Mengsi's face faltered slightly. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. She was silent for a moment. Avoiding my gaze, she said softly, let's go downstairs too. I looked at her profile. I clearly noticed the change in her emotions. Knowing she didn't want to continue this topic, I didn't ask further. I just nodded and replied, okay. Shin Mengsi and I walked downstairs side by side. As the two of us reached the top of the stairs, we saw the warm scene in the living room downstairs. Grandpa and Grandma Shen were gathered around Nainai. One was teasing her with a small toy. The other was telling her jokes. Occasionally, you could hear Nainai's clear, childish laughter. Shin Mengsi looked at the scene before her. The corners of her lips unconsciously curved into a gentle arc. Her entire aura softened. Her eyes were filled with warmth. I looked down at her, seeing the heartfelt smile on her face. My heart softened as well. I reached out and gently wrapped my arm around her waist, pulling her into my embrace. Shin Mengsi was slightly stunned. Then she looked up at me beside her. Our eyes met. The smile in her eyes deepened. She gently leaned into my embrace, feeling the warmth of my chest. Happiness quietly filled her heart. After dinner, Grandma Shen and Shin Mengsi took Nainai to play with puzzles on the living room carpet. The sound of happy laughter was endless. As for me, I followed Grandpa Shen to the pavilion outside. The night breeze was slightly cool, blowing away some of the day's stuffiness. A tea set was already arranged on the stone table in the pavilion. Grandpa Shen signaled for me to sit down. I obediently sat. Watching Grandpa Shen leisurely prepare the tea, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. My back also unconsciously straightened a bit. Grandpa Shen pushed a brewed cup of tea in front of me. He looked up at me. His eyes held a knowing smile as he spoke. No need to be so tense, he began slowly. His voice was gentle. I nodded slightly, smiled, and took a sip of tea. Grandpa Shen continued, Mengsi chose you. As her elders, we will naturally respect her choice. Hearing this sentence, the tense string in my heart suddenly relaxed. It was like a heavy weight had been lifted. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Grandpa Shen looked at me, a gentle smile in his eyes, and continued, the old wife and I don't have many years left. He paused for a moment. His voice carried a bit of solemnity and entrustment. When the day comes that we're really gone, Mengsi will have to rely on you to take good care of her. Hearing this, my heart tightened. I hurriedly said, Grandpa, you and Grandma are both in good health. You will surely live to be 100. Grandpa Shen heard this. He just smiled. That smile carried a hint of worldly wisdom and sorrow, but he didn't say more. He lifted his teacup. He took a gentle sip, his gaze distant, as if reminiscing about something. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth, his voice calm, but it carried a barely perceptible hint of disappointment. How can one live to be 100? To see Mengsi start a family, to have you, and even Nainai. Our lives are already very content. I heard his calm tone, but my heart felt inexplicably heavy. I didn't want to continue this somewhat sad topic. My gaze shifted slightly. I recalled the grandparents' unusual behavior in the piano room during the day. Along with Shen Mengsi avoiding the topic of the trophies, the doubt in my heart resurfaced. I thought for a moment. I tentatively asked, Grandpa, speaking of which, why haven't I seen Mengsi's parents? As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the pavilion suddenly froze. Grandpa Shen's hand holding the teacup paused slightly. The smile on his face also gradually faded, replaced by a deep silence. He looked down at the floating tea leaves in his... He didn't speak for a long time. After a long while, Grandpa Shen let out a soft sigh. That sigh seemed to contain endless sorrow and helplessness. He looked up, he looked at me with a complex expression and asked, "Hasn't Mengsi mentioned her parents to you?" I met his gaze and honestly shook my head. "No, never." I paused for a moment. I added, "That's why I wanted to ask you." Grandpa Shen's eyes darkened a little. He slowly put down his teacup, making a soft clicking sound. It was extremely clear in the quiet night. He turned around, his gaze turned towards the brightly lit living room not far away. Through the window, one could vaguely see Shen Mengsi and the faint figure of Nainai playing. His voice, tinged with sadness, slowly began. "Mengsi was an unwanted child." As soon as these words were spoken, I was completely stunned. Unable to react for a moment, I subconsciously furrowed my brow and whispered, "An unwanted child? Grandpa, what does that mean? Could there really be parents who don't want their own child?" Grandpa Shen's gaze grew even dimmer, full of the vicissitudes of time. He slowly explained, his voice carried a barely perceptible hoarseness. "Mengsi's parents met in university, but less than 3 years after they got married, they went from being deeply in love at the beginning to despising the sight of each other later on." I heard this, an expression of disbelief appeared on my face, a considerable turmoil stirred in my heart. I was about to say something, but Grandpa Shen laughed bitterly. That smile was full of helplessness and sorrow. He gently waved his hand, signaling me to listen to him continue. "You don't need to be so surprised, son. Their personalities are both too strong. Neither is willing to yield an inch to the other. Two people like that were destined to have a difficult time together." Grandpa Shen paused for a moment. His eyes revealed a deep wariness. It was right at that time, when they decided to break up, that Mengsi's mother discovered she was pregnant. As he said this, he sighed heavily again. Under the firm request of both families, she still gave birth to Mengsi. Grandpa Shen's voice trembled slightly. His eye sockets were red, covered with a thin layer of moisture. Grandpa Shen let out a long breath, as if to release all the heaviness accumulated in his chest, and slowly said, "So, Mengsi really was an unwanted child." My heart suddenly sank, as if crushed by something heavy. It felt suffocating, very uncomfortable. Grandpa Shen's voice continued, carrying an indescribable sorrow. "From the time Mengsi was born until she was 8 years old, she was always an unloved child. Her parents paid her no mind at all. By the time we really realized the problem, some issues had already appeared in Mengsi's heart." Speaking of this, Grandpa Shen's face was full of deep regret and self-blame. His voice also choked up a bit. "It's our fault for not discovering it sooner, for not bringing her to our side sooner." Hearing this, I wasn't too surprised in my heart. At this moment, Grandpa Shen's words were merely confirming the thoughts in my heart. I also finally understood why Shen Mengsi, in her daily life, always gave me a feeling of being meticulously careful, even carrying a sense of trying to please others, whether it was facing me or facing Nainai. She seemed to be used to observing others' expressions first, afraid that she would do something wrong and make the other person unhappy. It turns out those small insecurities and sensitivities all stem from a lack of love and a sense of security in her childhood. Thinking of these things, my heart felt as if it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Aching in waves, my pity for Shen Mengsi reached its peak at this moment. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my surging emotions. Then I asked softly, "Grandpa, then what's the deal with the broken trophies in the piano room?" Grandpa Shen heard this. A trace of confusion and bewilderment appeared on his wrinkled face. He gently shook his head, his voice a little low. "Actually, I'm not too clear about this matter either. I only remember that day she came home from school without saying a word. She just ran into the piano room by herself. Then we heard the sound of things being smashed inside. By the time we went in to check, those trophies had all been smashed by her own hands. Since then, she never touched the piano again, and she rarely mentioned anything related to the piano." I listened to Grandpa Shen's words, my brows furrowing slightly. I fell into deep thought. I couldn't imagine what this must have been like for Shen Mengsi. As a child, what a huge blow it must have been. Those trophies were probably the only thing at that time she could hold on to prove her own worth. When this source of validation also collapsed, how heartbroken and desperate she must have been. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but turn my gaze towards the living room. An indescribable emotion welled up in my heart. Just then, Shen Mengsi, holding Nene's small hand, walked out from the living room. They were slowly walking towards the pavilion. "Great-grandpa," Nene's clear voice broke the silence in the pavilion. She let go of Shen Mengsi's hand and ran towards Grandpa Shen. The heaviness and sorrow on Grandpa Shen's face immediately disappeared, replaced by a kind smile, the kind he reserved for his great-granddaughter. He laughed and replied, "Nene, why did you come over?" Nene ran up to Grandpa Shen. She lifted her little head, her childish voice saying, "Great-grandma said, it's time for you to take your medicine." Grandpa Shen heard this. The smile on his face deepened. He reached out his hand and affectionately stroked Nene's little head, saying gently, "Okay, Great-grandpa will go take his medicine right now." With that, he stood up, he took Nene's small hand, and they walked towards the living room together. Shen Mengsi also walked into the pavilion at this time. She sat down on the stone bench next to me and picked up the teapot. She first refilled my cup with tea, then she poured a cup for herself. She lifted her teacup, took a gentle sip, then turned her head to look at me. She asked softly, "What did you and Grandpa talk about?" I looked at her gentle profile. A gentle smile also appeared in my eyes. I said softly, "Grandpa told me to take good care of you." As I spoke, I leaned forward slightly, slowly getting closer to Shen Mengxi. Shen Mengxi smiled at me. She was about to say something, but the next second, she suddenly felt a warm, soft sensation on her lips. I gently kissed her rosy lips. Shen Mengxi froze for a moment. Her long eyelashes trembled a few times as she blinked. A clear look of surprise appeared on her face. I looked at her somewhat flustered appearance. The smile on my lips deepened. I said softly, "Grandpa and Grandma have already acknowledged me as their grandson-in-law, so what's wrong with me kissing my wife?" Shen Mengxi heard my reasonable words. Her cheeks unconsciously grew hotter, and she averted her gaze. She didn't dare to look directly at me. This shy appearance of hers, in my eyes, was just incredibly cute. I leaned forward again. I reached out, gently pulled her, and hugged her before Shen Mengxi could react. I gently kissed her warm cheek again. "This is what you owed me from this morning." My voice sounded in her ear. My voice carried a smile. Hearing this, Shen Mengxi immediately recalled the scene at the school gate this morning when she stood on her tiptoes to ask for a kiss. Whoosh! She felt the heat on her face instantly skyrocket, so red it felt like it could bleed. She was incredibly embarrassed. She buried her head directly in my neck. The tip of her nose was filled with the pleasant, fresh scent from my body, making her feel inexplicably at ease and attached. For a moment, she was a little reluctant to leave. As if possessed, she opened her mouth slightly and gently took a small bite of my neck. My body stiffened slightly. I could clearly feel the tiny sensation on my neck. It didn't hurt. Instead, it was a little itchy and tingly. I looked down at the person in my arms. Shen Mengxi was burying her face even deeper. A flash of surprise and amusement passed through my eyes. Shen Mengxi also immediately realized what she had done. An intense feeling of shame welled up in her heart. She suddenly lifted her head from my embrace. Her cheeks flushed. Her gaze was a bit evasive. "I'm going to check on Nai." She left a panicked sentence, and then fled, quickly leaving the pavilion. I looked at her somewhat hasty back. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. I raised my hand and gently touched the spot where she had bitten me. The curve of my lips lifted even higher. "Why did you bite me?" I whispered, but my voice was full of affection. Then I also stood up and walked towards the living room. Over there, Grandpa and Grandma Shen were sitting on the sofa, smiling at us. Grandma Shen glanced over. She quickly noticed the faint red mark on my neck and asked, "Xiao Mu, what's wrong with your neck? Why is there a red patch?" Hearing this, meaningful smile appeared on my lips. My mischievous gaze shifted to Shen Mengxi beside me, but I didn't say anything. Shen Mengxi caught my gaze. Her heart skipped a beat, and her cheeks couldn't help but heat up again. She hurriedly avoided my gaze. Grandpa Shen took in the whole scene and smiled knowingly. He gently tugged on Grandma Shen's sleeve and gave her a meaningful look. Grandma Shen immediately understood, looking at Shen Mengxi's shy appearance. She couldn't help but lower her voice and said to Grandpa Shen with a teasing tone, "I really couldn't tell. Our Mengxi looks as cold as a large block of ice." I didn't expect her to be so wild in private. Hearing his wife's words, Grandpa Shen tried to suppress his laughter, his shoulders shaking slightly. Although Grandma Shen had deliberately lowered her voice, in the quiet living room, Shen Mengxi and I could still hear it very clearly. Shen Mengxi the blood immediately rushed to her face. She was so embarrassed she just wanted to find a hole to crawl into. She shot her grandma a reproachful glare, then turned around and walked quickly towards the stairs without looking back. "Aya! This child is still shy." Grandma Shen looked at her hasty back and couldn't help but chuckle softly. Shen Mengxi, on the stairs, heard this. Her footsteps quickened, almost as if she were fleeing for her life. Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen looked at each other and smiled, then looked at me. The smile on Grandma Shen's face was gentle and kind as she opened her mouth to speak. "Little Mew, it's getting late today. Just stay over." Before I could answer, Nai beside me clapped her hands happily. She spoke first. "I want to sleep with great-grandma. I want to sleep with great-grandma." I looked at her excited expression, smiled and nodded. "Okay." Nai received an affirmative answer and joyfully rushed into Grandma Shen's arms. Grandma Shen laughed and hugged her great-granddaughter, then said to me, "Mengxi's room is on the 3rd floor. You'll see it as soon as you go up. Toiletries, I'll have Auntie Zhang bring them up for you later." Hearing this, my cheeks grew a little hot, and I nodded gently, "Yes, thank you, Grandma." After saying that, I turned around and walked towards the stairs. A moment later, I reached the 3rd floor. I saw a room with the light on, its door ajar. I could faintly hear some small noises from inside. I tiptoed, slowly approaching. When I reached the door, I saw Shen Mengxi lying prone on top of a stuffed crocodile that was half her height. Her small fists, one by one, were punching that innocent stuffed animal. While she muttered something, but her voice was too soft, I couldn't hear clearly. That appearance and her usual image of being cold and composed were completely different. It had a childish innocence. Looking at her like this, The corners of my mouth involuntarily turned up, my eyes also filled with a gentle smile. I found Chen Mengxi like this to be really cute. I couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. That soft chuckle was extremely clear in the quiet room. Chen Mengxi, who was lying on the stuffed crocodile, suddenly stopped her movements. Her whole body stiffening, she slowly turned over and looked towards the door. When she saw me standing at the door, she immediately felt like the sky was falling. Why did I forget to close the door? This time, I've completely lost face. She just wanted to find a hole to crawl into. I walked into the room. My gaze fell on the stuffed crocodile she had been punching. The eyes of that stuffed animal, from enduring too much violence, were bulging out a little, looking rather comical. The smile on my face couldn't help but deepen a little. Chen Mengxi glanced up at me, seeing I wasn't looking at her, but was staring with interest at the stuffed crocodile under her. She followed my gaze and saw the stuffed crocodile's eyes were bulging out a bit. Her cheeks immediately grew hot again, and she quickly reached out her hands. Flustered, she pushed the crocodile's bulging eyes back in, then she cleared her throat, trying to change the subject. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. Are we going home now? Only then did I shift my gaze from the stuffed animal, the poor crocodile, and let it fall on her beautiful, blushing face. I walked to the bed, sat down beside her, and shook my head, and said, "We're not going back." Chen Mengxi was a bit stunned. She looked at me in disbelief. "We're not." I met her questioning gaze. The corners of my lips turned up slightly, my eyes holding a smile as I said, "We're sleeping here tonight." Chen Mengxi's heart skipped a beat. The heat on her cheeks intensified. She unconsciously lowered her eyes and nodded. Her voice was a little tense. "Then he'll go give Nai Nai a bath." It seemed only by finding something to do could she hide her current panic, but I grabbed her wrist, stopping her from getting up, and said with a smile, "No need. Grandma and Grandpa said Nai Nai is sleeping with them tonight." Hearing this, Chen Mengxi became even more flustered, not knowing what to do with her hands and feet, but deep down, inexplicable sense of anticipation arose. I let go of her hand and lay down on the bed, with my hands behind my head, letting out a comfortable sigh. "Your bed is much more comfortable than mine." Chen Mengxi tilted her head, looking at me lying on her bed. The corners of her lips turned up slightly. She bit her lower lip, hesitated for a moment, then lay down next to me. Chen Mengxi scooted closer to me, but the crocodile was in the way. Without a second thought, she kicked the crocodile off the bed. Then she slowly inched closer to my side. I noticed her small movement and suddenly turned over, propping my head up with one hand, smiling brightly at the sneaky Chen Mengxi. Chen Mengxi didn't expect me to suddenly turn over. She was stunned for a moment, looking up at me. Our eyes met. She looked a bit flustered, as if caught red-handed. She grabbed my shirt and shyly closed her eyes, using her head to butt my chest a few times. I was completely unprepared. I was butted 3 or 4 times and let out a grunt. "No way! Are all girls' heads this hard?" I didn't have time to think much. I quickly pulled Chen Mengxi into my arms, not daring to let her butt me again. If she kept butting like this, I'd probably be seeing my ancestors. The next morning, when Chen Mengxi slowly woke up, she found herself lying peacefully in a warm embrace. She shifted slightly, the tip of her nose touching a firm chest, smelling the faint, fresh scent that belonged to me. Her cheeks involuntarily grew hot. She didn't open her eyes immediately, but greedily stayed in this embrace a while longer. A moment later, she slowly opened her eyes, looking up at the sleeping face so close to hers. A soft feeling welled up in her heart. She couldn't help but reach out, wanting to gently touch the end of my eyebrow, but just as her fingertips were about to touch me, I suddenly stirred. I opened my eyes, catching her gaze before she could pull it away. My eyes were still sleepy, but they quickly filled with a smile. "Good morning." My voice was a bit hoarse. Chen Mengxi's heart skipped a beat. Her cheeks instantly. She flusteredly pulled her hand back and replied in a small voice, "Good morning." Then she quickly got up and went into the bathroom to brush her teeth and wash her face. When we went downstairs, Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen were already sitting at the breakfast table. Seeing us come down, they both had kind smiles on their faces. "Hurry and have breakfast," Grandma Shen called out. Nai Nai was already sitting obediently in her seat, eating a small steamed bun. She called out with her mouth full, "Daddy! Mommy!" Chen Mengxi and I looked at each other and smiled, responding to her. Then we walked to the table and sat down. The atmosphere at the breakfast table was warm and lovely, filled with a sense of family. Chen Mengxi looked at everything before her and felt an unprecedented peace in her heart. After breakfast, Chen Mengxi and I brought Nai Nai to say goodbye to Grandpa Shen and Grandma Shen. Chen Mengxi sat in the driver's seat, and I sat in the passenger seat, while Nai Nai sat in the car seat in the back. The car slowly left the Shen family villa, heading towards the kindergarten. Very quickly, the car stopped in front of Nai Nai's kindergarten. Nai Nai, wearing her small backpack, excitedly unbuckled her seatbelt. "Goodbye, Daddy! Mommy!" Nai Nai waved her little hand and skipped out of the car, running into the kindergarten. Chen Mengxi and I smiled and replied, "Goodbye, Nai Nai." Watching Nai Nai's figure disappear at the school gate, Chen Mengxi withdrew her gaze and started the car again. Soon, the car slowly stopped at the gate of a university. Chen Mengxi parked the car by the roadside. I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned over to look at Chen Mengxi just as I was about to say goodbye. Chen Mengxi suddenly spoke up. Her voice was a bit hesitant. I looked at her, my eyes held a questioning look. This afternoon, I have something to do. Chen Mengxi lowered her eyes and said softly, you go pick up Nei Nei. Hearing that, the corners of my lips curved into a smile, and I replied, okay. As I finished speaking, I pushed open the car door. Just as I was about to get out, I suddenly stopped. I turned back, leaning towards the driver's seat. Before Chen Mengxi could react, my face was right in front of hers. The next second, a warm, soft feeling landed on her lips. I gave her plump red lips a light peck and reminded her, drive safely. After saying that, I raised my hand and gently patted her head. Chen Mengxi's whole body stiffened. Her eyes widened, looking at me so close, her cheeks immediately felt like they were on fire. Quickly turning a shade of red, she subconsciously nodded, her gaze slightly avoidant, but she could suppress the corners of her lips from turning up. That smile was like a newlywed bride's, carrying a shy sweetness. Looking at her like this, my heart melted, and the smile on my lips deepened. I didn't say anything more, just smiled, got out of the car, and walked towards the school. Chen Mengxi sat in the car, watching my back, until I disappeared behind the school gate. Her cheeks were still burning, and her heart was pounding. The scene from just now kept replaying in her mind. Wait a minute, he just patted my head. That brat has gotten bold. At the same time, I walked in the classroom. There was still some time before class started. There weren't many people in the classroom. I glanced over and saw Yang Wei sitting by the window. Why so early today? I walked over to Yang Wei's side, pulled out a chair to sit down, and asked casually. Yang Wei didn't answer right away, but looked up, glaring at me. His eyes were filled with obvious resentment and dissatisfaction. You still have the nerve to ask, Yang Wei said angrily. You're a liar. You ditch your friends for a girl. I was stunned by his scolding, a confused look on my face. What liar? Ditch friends for a girl? What did I do? Yang Wei snorted coldly and turned his head away, his tone even more dissatisfied. Yesterday you said you'd send me Sister Eula's hospital address. And what happened? You still haven't sent it. Did you forget? Hearing that, I finally understood. Yesterday I was busy meeting the grandparents with Chen Mengxi, and then I stayed at her place, so I completely forgot about this. That I laughed and explained. Didn't I tell you yesterday? Mengxi took me to meet her grandparents. I just forgot for a moment. Saying that, I took out my found me Eula's WeChat contact card and sent it to Yang Wei. There, I've sent you my sister's WeChat. You can ask her yourself. Hearing that, Yang Wei's eyes immediately lit up. The dissatisfaction on his face vanished completely. He put his arm around my shoulder, his tone extremely friendly. Good brother, I knew you were reliable. I was a bit speechless and let him hug me. After he let go, Yang Wei quickly opened WeChat and tapped add friend. Hey, yo, right? Yang Wei, while using his phone, tapped my arm and asked in a low voice, do you know that Chu Yu and Xia Signing have fallen out? I shook my head and said with an indifferent expression, don't know. Not interested. Yang Wei looked at me and said with a grin, it's because of a man. He lowered his voice and continued. Guess what kind of man could make the two bells of the arts department turn against each other? After saying that, he didn't forget to raise his eyebrows at me. My expression was calm. I shook my head. Not curious. Yang Wei clearly didn't believe me. He leaned in closer and asked, really not curious? Those are the two great bells of the arts department. They were usually as close as one person. Now they're in such a mess over a man. You're really not curious at all. Don't you want to know who that man is? I glanced at him. The corners of my lips curved into a faint arc. Yang Wei saw my expression. He chuckled, and with his index finger and thumb, he made a gesture of zipping his lips, indicating he wouldn't say any more. Time quickly passed to 10:30, and the bell for the end of class rang. Yang Wei and I followed the crowd out of the classroom, heading towards the school gate. Hey, how about we go for a big meal this afternoon? Yang Wei said, putting his arm around my shoulder. I shook my head and rejected his offer. Can't, I have to go to my parents' house. Hearing that, Yang Wei regretfully let go of my shoulder, but he still nodded. All right then, be careful on your way home, I replied, and about 20 minutes later, I took a bus to my house. I felt my pockets, only then did I realize I had forgotten to bring my keys when I left. Without thinking, I just raised my hand and knocked on the door. Inside the house, Murong Hao was carrying a plate of cut fruit to the living room. Placing the plate on the coffee table, he picked up a fork, speared a piece of apple, and brought it to the mouth of Fu Yanji, who was sitting on the sofa. Try it, the apples are very sweet today, Murong Hao said with a smile. Fu Yanji opened her mouth to take the apple. Just as she took a bite, she heard a knock on the door. Who is it? Fu Yanji asked. Looking at Murong Hao got up and went to open the door, and saw his dear son standing at the door. Grinning foolishly, The first thing Mirong Hao thought of when he saw his son was how he'd been tricked out of 2,500 yuan of his secret savings. The smile on his face instantly vanished, replaced by a look of disgust. Before I could say anything, Mirong Hao slammed the door shut. He turned around and walked calmly back into the living room. Who was it? Fu Yanji asked again, looking at Mirong Hao with some suspicion. Mirong Hao put a smile back on his face and said casually, "A scrap collector." Wrong door. Just as he finished speaking, the knocking sound came again, and at the same time, my voice came from outside the door. "Old man, it's me. Your son, your biological son." Hearing this, Fu Yanji raised an eyebrow. Her gaze held a hint of amusement as she looked at Mirong Hao. That look seemed to say, "Are you sure it's a scrap collector?" The smile on Mirong Hao's face froze. He quickly went back and opened the door again. This time, the look of disgust on his face had completely replaced by an enthusiastic expression. "Yo, my son, what brings you here? Come in quickly," Mirong Hao said, pulling me into the house. I snorted softly, ignoring my father's change in attitude. I walked straight into the house, and my eyes immediately fell on the fishing rod hanging in the entryway. I said with a laugh, "Dad, that new fishing rod you bought is nice." I said with a smile. My voice carried a hint of teasing. As soon as Fu Yanji heard new fishing rod, her eyes immediately fixed on Mirong Hao. A chill ran down Mirong Hao's back. He quickly waved his hands and hurriedly explained, "You're mistaken, son. You're mistaken. This rod was bought last year. It's old." Fu Yanji snorted softly and asked me with a smile, "Why did you suddenly come home?" I smiled and sat down on the living room sofa, casually picking up a piece of apple and putting it in my mouth. As I chewed the apple, I said, "I missed you all, so I came back to visit." After saying that, I stood up and went into the kitchen. I opened the fridge, glanced inside and saw coix seeds, lotus seeds, and spare ribs. There were also some river shrimp. Seeing the ingredients in the fridge, an idea suddenly came to me. There are so many ingredients here, I could make a love bento for Chen Mengxi. Thinking of this, I checked the time. It was past 11. If I start now, I can finish and bring it over just in time for her lunch. Thinking of this, I immediately took out the ingredients and started washing and preparing them. In the living room, Mirong Hao watched his dear son rummaging through the fridge and pouted. He said irritably, "I don't think he came to visit us. He came to visit our fridge." I heard this from the kitchen but didn't turn around. I replied with a laugh, "It's the same thing. By seeing what's in the fridge, I know how you're all doing." Mirong Hao huffed. He said no more, smiled, and sat down next to Fu Yanji, reminding me, "Make it a bit light. Your mother's stomach has been a little upset lately." I replied, "Got it." The sounds of chopping vegetables and running water soon filled the kitchen. I skillfully handled the ingredients, first blanching the ribs, then I put them in a clay pot, adding coix seeds, lotus seeds, and red dates. I added enough water, covered the pot, and started simmering the soup. About 40 to 50 minutes later, waves of fragrance wafted from the kitchen. I turned off the stove and wiped my hands. I called out to the living room, "Mom, where's our insulated lunchbox?" Hearing this, Fu Yanji thought for a moment and said, "On top of the fridge, wash it before you use it." I replied, "Okay," and walked to the fridge. I took the lunchbox from the top of the fridge and brought it to the sink, washing it clean. Just as I started putting the cooked food into the lunchbox, Fu Yanji and Mirong Hao in the living room seemed to react at the same time. They both turned around in unison, their burning gazes fixed on me. Busy in the kitchen, Fu Yanji frowned and whispered to Mirong Hao, "Honey, something's up with our son." Mirong Hao nodded, his eyes glued to his son's movements. Saying nothing, Fu Yanji looked at Mirong Hao and said in an even lower voice, "You go find out." Mirong Hao immediately shook his head like a rattled drum. "I'm not going. You go yourself." Fu Yanji glared. Her face darkened as she snapped, "Go on. Hurry up." Mirong Hao's back stiffened under his wife's glare. He immediately dropped the resistant look on his face. He quickly stood up, kind smile on his face, and walked towards the kitchen. Mirong Hao entered the kitchen, leaned in to peek at the food in the lunchbox. Then he looked at the soup in the pot and said with a laugh, "Yo, quite a spread. Stir-fried chives and shrimp too. You even made a heart shape. Not bad. Kid, you've got some of your old man's skills." When I saw my dad come in, my hands moved a bit faster. I hurriedly closed the lid of the lunchbox, then quickly put it into the insulated bag. I looked up at him and quickly averted my gaze, a bit embarrassed. "You brat, are you in love?" Mirong Hao asked, looking at his son's expression. He couldn't help but ask. I scratched my head shyly, nodded and said in a small voice, "I guess so." I didn't choose to hide it. After all, I had to bring Chen Mengxi to meet them in a few days anyway. Hiding it any longer would be meaningless. I might as well give my parents a little heads up, so when we meet, it'll be easier for them to accept. At least they won't faint. Thinking of this, I looked at my old man, cleared my throat, and asked, "Dad, can I ask you something?" Mirong Hao raised an eyebrow and asked with an interested smile, "What is it?" If I have a girlfriend, and she's a little bit older than me, just a little. I chose my words carefully, watching Muronghao's reaction. Would you two be against it? Hearing this, Muronghao laughed heartily, clapped my shoulder and said, "Hey, what's the big deal?" The smile on his face grew wider. He continued, "Of course not. Why would we be against it? We're not some old fossils. Besides, being a bit older is good. They know how to care for people." Muronghao said. He even lowered his voice and quietly added, "Except for your mother." Of course, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that. I said in a low voice, "Aren't you afraid Mom will hear you? Be careful. She might make you sleep on the sofa." Muronghao waved his hand, but his face showed a smug look, saying your mother is someone with a sharp tongue but a soft heart, a dagger mouth with a tofu heart. She always covers me with a blanket in the middle of the night. I was speechless. I frowned at my old man. Was he showing off? After he finished speaking, I carefully ladled the soup from the clay pot into another insulated container. Then I put that into the insulated bag as well. Then I carried the insulated bag out of the kitchen and into the living room. Fu Yanji was sitting on the sofa, smiling at me. I walked to the coffee table and also grabbed a few washed, putting them in a small bag. "Mom, I'm not eating at home," I said. Then I picked up the insulated bag and the bag of fruit and turned to leave. "Okay. Be careful, don't spill the soup," Fu Yanji said with a smile. Seeing me in a hurry, "I know." I called out to my parents in the living room and rushed out the door before they could reply. I took a taxi straight to the Shen group. Seeing her son leave, Fu Yanji quickly stood up and went into the kitchen. She saw Muronghao drinking the soup and was speechless. She walked over, snatched the bowl from his hand and asked, "Stop drinking. Tell me quickly, what's the situation with our son?" Muronghao said with a smile, "He's most likely in love." He paused for a moment, then added, "From what he said, the person he's with is an older woman." Fu Yanji took the bowl. Hearing this, she was first stunned, then she burst out laughing. I knew that boy wasn't being honest. A moment later, the taxi stopped steadily in front of the Shen Group building, paid the fare, carried the insulated bag, and walked into the lobby. I went straight to the reception desk and asked politely, "Hello, may I ask what floor CEO Chen Mengxi's office is on?" A female receptionist in a business suit, who looked like a team leader, looked up when she heard my voice. When she saw clearly who it was, a professional smile immediately appeared on her face. "Hello, sir. CEO Shen's office is on the top floor." This team leader had clearly seen me before. She didn't ask many questions and directly made a welcoming gesture. "I'll take you there." "Thank you." I nodded. The team leader led me to a private elevator and used her employee card to grant access. The elevator is preset to go directly to the top floor, the team leader said with a smile, then turned and left. I thanked her again, carried the insulated bag, and stepped into the elevator. The elevator doors slowly closed and it ascended steadily. At the same time, that female team leader returned to her post and quickly took out her phone to send a message to Assistant Chen. "Assistant Chen, CEO Shen's husband is here. I've sent him up in the private elevator." On the top floor, Assistant Chen had just come out of the CEO's office, holding a few documents that needed to be processed. He was standing at the elevator, waiting for it to come down. He frowned slightly, thinking about some work details CEO Shen had just assigned. His phone vibrated. Assistant Chen took it out. He glanced at the message on the screen. His eyes paused for a moment. Before he could react, the elevator in front of him dinged and the doors slowly opened. Assistant Chen subconsciously looked up. Inside the elevator, I was carrying an insulated bag. I saw Assistant Chen outside the elevator. I nodded politely to him. I stepped out of the elevator and asked, "Assistant Chen, which room is CEO Shen's office?" Assistant Chen quickly came to his senses and put his phone away. He put on a standard professional smile and bowed slightly. He respectfully addressed me, "Sir." He turned to the side and gestured with his hand. "CEO Shen's office is this way. Please follow me." I hummed in acknowledgement and followed Assistant Chen. The two of us, one in front of the other, walked through the quiet hallway. Assistant Chen stopped in front of a heavy, solid wood door. He raised his hand and knocked gently on the door. Meanwhile, in the office, Chen Mengxi was sitting behind her desk, her head slightly bowed. On the phone in front of her, a cooking tutorial video was playing. Occasionally, she would pick up her pen and quickly jot down some key points in an open notebook. Knock, knock, knock. The office door was knocked on gently. Chen Mengxi thought it was Assistant Chen who had left and come back. Without looking up, she replied in a cold voice. The office door was pushed open. Assistant Chen bowed slightly. I carried the insulated bag and stepped inside. I immediately saw Chen Mengxi, leaning over her large desk, intently watching her phone. A pen was still in her hand, as if she was seriously taking notes. Chen Mengxi heard footsteps, thinking it was still Assistant Chen. She asked casually, "What is it? Is there something else?" As she asked, she looked up. Her gaze moved from the notebook to the door. When she saw clearly who was standing there, Chen Mengxi's entire body froze. She blinked, wondering if she missed me so much. that she was hallucinating from hunger. I saw her staring at me blankly. A smile appeared on my face as I asked, "Are you not happy to see me?" Hearing my voice, she suddenly reacted. This wasn't a hallucination. She quickly shook her head and said, "No, not at all." As she spoke, a smile blossomed on her face. The next second, she suddenly realized she was still watching a cooking tutorial. Her cheeks immediately grew a little hot. She almost reflexively turned off her phone screen and shut her open notebook with a snap. Immediately after, she stood up in a bit of a panic. Her clear eyes looked at me guiltily as she asked, "Why are you here?" There was surprise in her voice, but even more joy. I held up the insulated bag in my hand and said with a smile, "Of course, I came to bring you lunch." Hearing this, Chen Mengxi's heart suddenly warmed, as if something had gently struck it. He was afraid I would be hungry, so he specially cooked and brought it over. Thinking of this, the smile on her lips deepened a little. I didn't expect him to be so thoughtful. I saw her staring at me blankly with a silly smile. Not saying anything, my eyebrows furrowed slightly. She hasn't starved herself, silly. Has she? I coughed lightly and asked, "Have you had lunch yet?" Hearing that, Chen Mengxi snapped out of her daze and quickly shook her head. Her voice also carried a faint note of joy. "Not yet. I haven't." Saying that, she quickly walked out from behind her desk, took my hand and led me to the sofa. "Hurry! Sit down." I did as she said and sat down, placing the insulated bag on the coffee table. Then I took out the insulated containers one by one. As the lids of the containers were opened one by one, the rich aroma of food immediately filled the spacious office. Chen Mengxi smelled the food's aroma and swallowed. Her stomach inconveniently rumbled twice. Her cheeks immediately turned a few shades redder. She lowered her eyes, a bit embarrassed, but she peeked at me from the corner of her eye. I looked at her adorable appearance and couldn't help but chuckle softly. I handed a pair of chopsticks to her and said, "Hurry up and eat. This soup was specially stewed for you." Chen Mengxi took the chopsticks. She was about to say something. From the corner of my eye, I saw that Assistant Chen was still standing at the door. I asked with some suspicion, "Assistant Chen, have you eaten yet? Do you want to eat with us?" Before Assistant Chen could answer, a bone-chillingly cold gaze suddenly shot over, causing him to shiver involuntarily. Assistant Chen struggled to trace the source of that gaze. He saw his own Xiao Shen staring intently at him. That gaze clearly carried a warning and thick killing intent, as if to say, "If you dare to eat the meal my husband personally cooked, then prepare to go mine for coal in Africa." Assistant Chen swallowed hard. His survival instincts made him immediately shake his head frantically. His voice also a little shaky. "No. No need, sir. Xiao Shen, I still have work to attend to, so we'll be leaving first." After speaking, he practically fled for his life, retreating from the CEO's office, and tactfully closed the door. Assistant Chen stood outside. He let out a long sigh, patting his chest. Still in fear, he muttered under his breath, "It's over. It's over. Xiao Shen is lovesick. My life is as good as over."